questions, as he would say, about halfway through, and then again at the end. Fair enough? Hi.
All right, well, thanks for the awesome introduction. My name's Bill. I guess the first thing you should know about me is that I'm from this area. I went to this high school. I went to elementary school, the middle school, and then high school here. So I don't want to say like I know what you guys are going through, because I don't. But in 1999, when I graduated here, I was a student in these hallways, wandering around here trying to figure out who I was going to be, what I wanted to do. I had no idea, and I was just trying to make the best out of it. So that's a little bit about me. So there's two more things I'm going to write on the board here that make me a little bit more interesting to you guys. So the first thing would be so I'm currently kind of an entrepreneur. I manage a bunch of different businesses. My dream is to be a writer, so I have a blog that's got like 100,000 views at Wealth Well Done. I'm worth about $200,000 to $300,000, and I'm trying to live my dream in life. Like it's not about money to me, it's just doing what I want to do. So that's kind of who I am now. We'll talk about that later. It's always fun to talk about how successful you are, and not about how big a failure you have been. So that's going to be my next thing. Do you guys know anything about me at all? Not much? Okay. So here's the next thing. I was in prison for a very, very long time. I was actually incarcerated from 2002 to 2012. So I was in prison for 10 years straight. It's a long time, isn't it? Do I look like a guy who was in prison? No, not at all. I probably don't fit the description if you saw me walking down the streets, and if you saw me talking about being this guy, you probably wouldn't expect that. But that's who I am and where I've come from. So I just say that to let you know, like, no matter what mistakes you make in life, like, you can come back from anything. So hopefully if you know, I want that to stick with you, that no matter what unfortunate things happen to you, you can come back and become whoever you want to be. So let's just get into my story now and talk about this and how this ended up, and then how I eventually turned it all around and became this guy. So I grew up around this area. I had two parents who loved me very, very much. I had, you know, nice home. There was gardens in the yard. I mean, everything was perfect for me, what I thought growing up. I had a great family. There was no warning signs that I would ever get involved with drugs or go to prison or get involved with the law. Nothing. It wasn't until I was about 14 years old, and that's when I think I had to make the first adult decision in my life. Like, when I think about my life, it comes back to that moment when I was 14 years old. We were in the woods with some friends. They were older kids in the neighborhood. I think I was going into 8th grade. They were going into 9th grade. We were building a fort like we did all summer longs out in the woods, and all of a sudden one of them pulls out a joint. And I was like, whoa, I'd never seen that before. Like what's this? And so he's got this joint. And he lights it up and he starts passing around the circle. And I remember, like, that was the first adult decision I had to make. Like, who am I going to be? Am I going to be somebody that says, no, I don't want to do that, that's illegal, my parents told me not to do that, that school told me not to do that? Or am I going to be somebody that, you know, takes it and is going to be curious and is going to experiment and see and learn what life is like on my own? And so as the joint got around to the 5 of us that were standing there, it came to me, and I'm like, well, I want to see what this is about. I'm curious. I want to see what weed is all about. I want to get high. I want to try it. Like, I'm smart. I'm not becoming a drug addict. I'm not going to drop out of school tomorrow. So when the joint got to me, I took a big puff, and I got high. And I liked it. Nothing bad happened. You know, we were acted stupid, like we were, you know, teenagers in the woods, and laughed at each other and whatever. And then when we came down, I went home. You know, I wasn't a drug addict. Nothing bad happened to me. None of my friends that I was with turned into drug addicts or dropped out of school or missed school the next day. It was fine. So I thought, hey, as long as you can kind of control your, you know, drug use, like, it's cool. Why should I not stop doing it? In fact, it took me into a different world that I liked, and I felt like I belonged in. And it was interesting to me. Like, being high was cool to me. And So when I came down, I was like, well, I'm just going to keep doing this. This is not bad. So I got high a little bit more. So then that adult decision led me to another decision I made that I look back now and I was like, shoot, that was a bad situation to find myself in, because now I'm smoking weed occasionally and I'm from a nice area. I can't tell my parents I'm doing this, because if they know, I'm getting in trouble. So I'm getting grounded by them, maybe get in-school suspension if the school finds out that I'm getting high. So I made another bad decision and I decided to split my lives into two parts. One part was this good kid that looked like he had it all together. I acted the way everybody wanted me to act. Like my teachers, my parents, I just did what they wanted me to do. And I was like, well, that's the secret to life. Just do what everybody else wants you to be. And then if you do that, then I could live my own secret life over here. And what do I want to do in my secret life? I want to get high, I want to experiment, I want to party, I want to hang out with my friends. I like, pushing the limits. This is fun over here. So I'm thinking, as long as I keep these two lives separate and never let these people know what I'm really doing, then I could live that way forever. And honestly, it worked for a long time. So I was 14 the first time I smoked weed. I think I was like 16 the first time I took LSD, mushrooms, methamphetamines. We probably snorted meth in this hallway somewhere here once or twice or 20 times, I don't know. Cocaine, I mean anything that came around. Whatever could take my normal world that I didn't really love. It's not that I hated it, I just wasn't fascinated with it. Whatever could make it cooler, that's what I wanted to do. So whenever drugs came around, I was willing to try them. So that kind of went from when I was 14 till I was like 19, 20. I graduated high school. I went to college. Again, I'm living these two different lives because I'm thinking, as long as I'm being what everybody wants me to be and looking how they want me to look, well then I can do what I want. And I got away with it for a long time until one night happened. And, if I could instill that to any of you, like, you guys can get away with whatever you're doing. And I should just stop and say, like, I know I'm not the only one doing this. Like, we all have what our parents want us to be, and we try to be that, and then we have our little secret lives over here. So it's kind of normal. You just don't want to happen what happened to me to happen to any of you. So I was 21 years old this night. This one night happened. I'd gotten high hundreds, thousands of times, and nothing bad ever happened. Until this night, I called a friend, see if he wanted to party. I was my senior year in college. And he was like, yeah, dude, I have to work, so let's meet up at your house later. I said, okay, cool. So I went, bought some drugs from a friend of mine that I knew from high school, still stayed in touch with, and I brought him back to my apartment, and then he shows up at probably 10 o'clock at night after he was done working. And we cut the drugs in half. He gave me the money he owed me for the stuff I picked up for him, and we began to get high. Now you have to understand, like, I'm just thinking, oh, we're just kids partying, it's not a big deal. Well, when the police get involved, they're going to look, that's a drug deal. Like, drugs went from my hand to another person's hand. And that's all they cared about. They didn't care about how good at kids we were, if we made mistakes. There's a drug deal that happened. So we got high around 9, acted stupid, just laughed at each other, hung out in my apartment, listened to music, whatever. And all of a sudden I remember we actually passed out a couple times, but that was normal to us. I mean, we'd been drinking before and passed out, and everybody wakes up the next morning. And so all of a sudden at 3 in the morning, he's like, oh dude, I want to go home. And I was like, man, just stay here, whatever. He's like, no, we lived in a small college town, so he only lived a couple blocks away from me. And he's like, no, I want to go home. I'll sleep better there. I have to work at like 8 in the morning, and I had to go to school at 8 in the morning too. So I understood, like, it's always better to sleep in your own bed. And eventually I was like, okay. So him and his friend that he was with walked back to another place and fell asleep like we'd done every single night. And the next morning I wake up, I go to summer school. It was a 3-hour statistics course, and it was super boring, and I was hungover. But I was still doing what everybody wanted me to do. I mean, I was a Dean's List student. My parents thought I was doing great. And I'm thinking I'd just live these two lives forever. I thought I was smarter than everybody else. I thought I had life all figured out. Until class was over and I started coming home and things weren't adding up. I biked back to my apartment. I called him looking for him and his phone didn't answer, his cell phone. I didn't think much of it. I knew he was at work. So then I get in my apartment and I call his house phone looking for him. See if we want to party again that night or later this afternoon or when he was getting off work. We could hang out. And his roommate answers. And I said, hey, you know, this is Bill. You want to do something later? And on the other end I hear, Bill, he's dead. He's dead. The cops are here. They're looking for you. You need to get out of there right now. They know who you are and they're coming for you. And I just remember like the dropping the phone and like this can't be happening to kids like us. Like he was fine when he left. I was with him. I partied with him. And all of a sudden in 30 seconds, my life went from fun and games, thinking I had it all together, thinking I was fooling everybody, to, oh my God, somebody's dead, the police are involved, and they're coming for me. I grabbed everything in my apartment that was illegal, because I had drugs, I was a partier, I had marijuana and pills and all types of stuff. I used to go to concerts and sell drugs, like it was, my life had become one massive party. And I thought the police would be like, oh, we understand, you know, you're a good kid, you just made some mistakes. That was the story I was telling in my mind. But what I learned was, like, the stories we tell in our minds can be so different from reality, and I lost track of reality. Because now the police are going to come, and they're not going to care how good a kid I was. They're coming after me, and they're going to hold me responsible for whatever nightmare happened I didn't even know about. I go running out my front door, and the police were there. And I remember just looking at him and with my backpack on, and I just, in my mind, said, he was fine when he left. Just total shock. I fit the description of the guy they were looking for, the police did, because they didn't know what apartment I was in, but they knew what I looked like, and my name was Bill. They said, are you Bill? And I was just stunned. And they put me in handcuffs. The first time I'd ever been in handcuffs. I mean, that's a shameful experience. And they brought me back to a squad car, and I still didn't really know everything that was happening. And they drove me from the college campus I was at, which was all free and happy and the best time of my life, on the way to jail. And I remember watching the college leave out of the back of a squad car window. And I didn't know at the time, but that was the last bit of freedom that I would see for the next 10 years of my life. They brought me to jail, and I was still in shock, and you get to make one phone call, so who do I call them? I call Mom and Dad, because they're the, I'm in this mess, who else am I going to call? And my mom answers, and I said, hey, it's Bill, and my mom was all happy on the other end, and I'm about to destroy her life, that now she's going to have a son in jail, and she didn't even do anything. Like, that was a whole nother revelation that the people we impact with our choices, I was only thinking about me. I didn't know how I was going to impact everybody else. And I told my mom, I said, and she had no idea I was a drug user. I said, Mom, there's a lot of things that you don't know about me, and I'm just going to start telling them to you now, because, I mean, I had nothing left to hide. And it was kind of a bittersweet moment for me, because it was the first time in 8 years that I'd been myself in front of people, and I still didn't really grasp that my friend was dead. I mean, of course, that was the first thing, but then there was also, like, you know, this life of lies I was living was over, and everybody was going to find out what I was all about, and that began my next life. So I'll just rewind a little bit. What happened that night was my friend left my apartment, walked home, got to where he was staying, from what we know, went to sleep, and he just never woke up. Just fell asleep and his heart stopped. He was just too high. And I had always believed that as long as we weren't using really bad drugs, crack and heroin, and using needles, like to me, in my mind, I don't know where I got this from, nobody ever told it to me, I just started believing it. that's when really bad things happen. That's when people die. That's when people become drug addicts. But we weren't. We were just using pharmaceutical drugs. We started off with weed and stuff, and then it progressed, and we started using Vicodin and Percocets, and that night we were using fentanyl. We were snorting it because I thought, oh, we're being safe. As long as we don't use needles, that's when it gets dangerous. But I was wrong. And now because of I made bad decisions, I'm living a nightmare, but I don't even have the worst of it because the other person who made bad decisions with me, my friend, he's dead. And he's never coming back. So I sat through jail for a year, going through the trial for it. I eventually got charged with reckless homicide by delivery of a controlled substance. Because all they had to prove was that the drugs came from my hand to his hand. It didn't matter what other drugs he'd been using or anything, just that I was part of the cause that led to his death. And I had done that. And I was charged with like 10 other felony charges too, that I think like for the drugs that I possessed. And I think I was facing like 180 years in prison. So, I mean, I'm still shocked when I think about it because we were just good kids, thinking we were just playing around. And the next thing, we went from that to this extreme of facing 180 years in prison. For my first time in trouble, I went to my sentencing hearing. The state was asking for 20 years incarcerated. And first time ever in trouble, I got sentenced to 10 years in prison for it. And that began my new life. I went through 6 months or a year of acceptance. When something bad happens to you, at least for me, I felt shame, I felt guilt, I felt confusion, I felt lost. And I don't know if it was, I'm a spiritual guy, so I don't know if I had a higher power, I don't know if it was God telling me, you could be something more than this, but I started accepting where I was, and then I started having a dream that somebody, when I first got to prison, he told me, hey, because I was kind of depressed and sad, and he looked at me and he's like, hey, you don't have a life sentence. And he says, they can't hold you forever. One day you will get out. And I held on to that. That was like my little ray of sunshine in the midst of this nightmare I was in. That, okay, this is temporary. It might be a long temporary, but this is temporary. And that motivated me I was like, you know what, I'm better than this. I'm not the monster that the state made me out to be. I'm better than this. And I'm going to spend every day, and even if it's a tiny little bit, I'm going to get better every single day so when my opportunity comes, I can take advantage of it. And that was my whole prison world, was just preparing, getting ready. I fell in love with writing when I was in there. I started writing journals. My journals now are like 3,000 pages. Then I got into writing stories and books. A famous author, Gary Paulson, he wrote the book Hatchet. He read some of my writing and actually called me from prison. He was like, oh, I want to help you. You're doing really well. He's like, you're a good writer, and I want to, you have more to offer the world. And so all those little things, and I just started getting motivated. I didn't know how it was going to go when I got out. Because 10 years, you kind of lose track of what prison or what the outside world is like. But I just had a dream that I would get out. And my dream was, one, success to me wasn't money, fame, anything. It was not coming back to prison. That was my first goal. So let's not return to drugs because I was ashamed with who I was. So once I realized what I didn't want to be, and I was also a liar, I was a lot of things I hated being. So my goal was never to be that person again. And then two is just to get out, get a $10 an hour job, which is, your most basic job. And then I knew once I got out, then just set a little bit bigger goals. One goal after another. And so I'm going to kind of pause here, and we can talk about my prison adventure before I go on to the last part about what I did after I got out of prison. So we can ask questions, feel free. But yeah, so we got any questions for drugs, prison, anything like that? Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to come to you next.
Why did you start in the first place?
That's a great question. Up on the board over here it says, why use? Why did I use? Because for me, it's a great question. For me, becoming who I was supposed to be was hard work. And I was afraid of that. I'd have to be uncomfortable, I'd have to take risks, and I was afraid. And when I got high, it made me feel cool. And it was like an easy, cheap way to do that. Because to become the real me, man, I'd have to work, I'd have to try, I'd have to get rejected, I'd have to be laughed at because you're not going to become perfect the first time, and that was scary. But when I paid $5 for a joint and I could smoke it and feel awesome, it was just way easier. And then once weed was okay, well then I wanted to take the next drug because that went out fine, and I wanted to get higher and higher, and I started living this whole fantasy world that I invented for myself that it was okay and whatever. And it was, until I saw the consequences of people can die and you can go to jail for it. So, and then I'm going to come over here too.
So like, what was a typical day like? Or what did you kind of do in prison, like with writing and other stuff?
Yeah, it took me a year to figure out my routine, and then I started writing a journal. And that was in the first year, because for whatever reason I heard this voice inside my mind that said, you're going to want to remember this one day. And so I just started writing. And writing was kind of a new drug for me because it helped me escape where I was. And when I was writing, I was kind of finding myself and finding new ideas, and it started giving me hope. I'm like, oh, I'm smarter than what I maybe thought I was or who had ever been in the past. And so that led to eventually when I got to prison and I got really good at it, I had the same basically routine for the 8 final years. Was I'd wake up at 7:30, there were 7:30 count. Every inmate had to go stand on the tier and be counted to make sure nobody escaped. I'd have a cup of coffee, then I'd write from 8 o'clock till 11, work on stories, edit stuff. Then I'd have lunch from 11 till 1. I'd write again for 2 hours afterwards, so from 1 to 3. And then I'd spend the nights, I became a long distance runner, and I'd read. And in between there, there'd be meetings with other, I tried to find the best of the best prison population people. Because even though prison was full of a bunch of people I had didn't want anything to do with, just a bunch of criminals that were planning their next criminal enterprise, there was a small percentage of people like me that were like, I don't want to do that again. And some of these guys were lifers, committed murder, and they found a higher calling in their life. A lot of them were pursuing God and saying, let's become better. And so I tried to just surround myself with that. And one thing I kind of learned is, and I live this to this day, is you're the average of the top 5 people you spend the most time with. And it was kind of just logic to me. It's like, well, if I want to become better, one of the easiest way to do that is to surround myself with people that are going to make me better and push me to be better. And so that was it. I was a long distance runner. I read and wrote a lot, and even when I say preparing for the streets, it was kind of understanding what I'm good at. Because when I understood what I'm good at, well then I could do that on the streets and make myself successful. Yeah. Yeah, right on over here.
Have you published a book before?
I have not. And we'll get this into the last part. So currently I have a blog called Wealth Well Done. When I got out, I never thought about money in the first place. When I got out, I found out I had a passion for it. Not necessarily the money part of it, but I like doing this full time. And so the easiest way for me to do this is to become financially free, so I don't have to have a job. And so that's what led me to save the money. And all of a sudden one day, I realized, oh, I'm really good at this stuff.